yourself. Would love to welcome everybody this morning. So good morning and welcome to the New Hampshire Commerce Corridor's American Rescue Plan Federal Update with Senators Jean Shaheen and Maggie Hassan. As I said, I'm Ashley Hazeltine. I'm the president for the Greater Derry-Londonderry Chamber of Commerce. We do have a full agenda this morning and we're looking forward to hearing from the senators. Before we do that, I would like to introduce Mike Skelton, President and CEO of the Manchester Chamber.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Senator Shaheen, Senator Hassan, for making time and joining us this morning. Really looking forward to the conversation. Want to thank Ashley for organizing this on behalf of the New Hampshire Commerce Corridor. And just want to say a quick welcome that the New Hampshire Commerce Corridor is actually a coalition of 7 chambers of commerce from Southern New Hampshire that formed during the course of the past year in response to the pandemic and discovering new ways that we could work together and collaborate and better serve our members. And webinars and roundtables like this are one of those things that we've been doing and offering jointly as 7 chambers working together, as well as working with the state and other partners to support our business community. I just quickly wanted to recognize the other members of our coalition before turning it back over to Ashley to get the program started. The Commerce Corridor includes Tim Sink from the Greater Concord Chamber, Kate Lusko from the Greater Nashua Chamber, Wendy Hunt from the Merrimack-Sauhegan Valley Chamber, Donna Morris from the Greater Salem Chamber, Brenda Collins from the Greater Hudson Chamber, along with Ashley and myself. So a great demonstration of regional collaboration. Thank you again, Senator Shaheen and Hassan, for all of your support, and your staff has been a great resource to us throughout this issue, and we really appreciate the partnership. So Ashley, I'll turn it over to you to get things rolling.
Great, thank you, Mike. A couple housekeeping items before we get started. We do ask that all attendees mute yourselves. You're of course welcome to shut off the video as well. If you have anything that comes up during the call today, we'll be utilizing the chat box feature. After the introductory remarks, we will open the Q&A session with some questions submitted by the Chamber's boards. We do also have some staff members from the Senator's office on the call today. They'll be monitoring the chat box as well as some of the Chamber leadership, so feel free to post any questions in there. Anything not answered today will be followed up by staff members after the call. I'd also like to thank Amy Bassett, the SBA's New Hampshire District Director and Interim Director for New England, for joining us on the call today. And Amy will also be available to answer questions as well. As a reminder, the senators are joining us today in their official roles as New Hampshire's United States Senators. The Chambers of Commerce are nonpartisan, apolitical organizations, and we ask that all questions today be asked with a business-focused mindset. And just one more time, I know we'd had a couple of people join us. Feel free to utilize the chat feature throughout the call today. And thank you to Kate, who will be monitoring for that questions for us during that portion, as well as we have several other chamber staff and senator staffers as well. So with that, we're going to open up with Senator Jean Shaheen. So Senator, if you'd like to share your remarks.
Well, thanks very much, Ashley and Mike, and thank you to all of the chambers who are participating this morning and to all of you who are joining us. I'm really pleased to be on the Zoom this morning with my colleague, Senator Hassan, and of course with Amy Bassett, who is the new head of the Small Business Office in New Hampshire. So we're delighted to have you joining us too. I have several staff members on, and I'm going to introduce them because I know many of you have worked with them, and if you haven't, you may need to work with them in the future. But we have Michelle Cota, who works on small business issues in New Hampshire for me, and Robert Hinson, who works on small business and economic issues in Washington. So delighted that they're on to listen and to try and respond. And I'm here in my Dover office with Sarah Holmes, who's my state director. So we have lots of folks who can try and be responsive to your questions. I know we have a lot to cover this morning, so I'll try and be brief. I'm very happy that we were able to pass the American Rescue Plan to provide help to so many families and small businesses that have been really worried about how they're going to get through this pandemic. I was at a food distribution site in Manchester on Friday, where we were at the Comcast offices, which has a very big parking lot, and cars were lined up for hours waiting for food distribution. They had enough food to help 1,000 households or 1,000 cars as they came through. So it's very clear that people still need help. And that's what this American Rescue Plan is designed to do. There are a number of small business provisions in it that I'm sure you all have been paying attention to. And I know we're going to get to those in a lot greater detail, but in addition to the PPP program, which has some additional funding, though we need to get an extension for that program because it's ending at the end of March. So I'm hopeful we can get an extension. I have legislation with some of my colleagues to do that. The House passed that last week, so hopefully we can get it done this week. In addition, we have help for entertainment operators for shuttered venue operating grants, the program is called, and the guidance has just been issued. Applications will be taken as of April the 8th. There's also significant funding in the proposal to help restaurants, which have been so hard hit in New Hampshire and across the country, about 28 billion, a little over that for restaurants. So I know we'll talk about those more, but I think as we think about how do we recover from this pandemic, how do we get businesses back, that some of the other provisions in the legislation are equally important because, as I'm sure you know, there are those pandemic relief checks so that hopefully people can get their bills paid and have money in their pockets so they can go out and start buying from many of your small businesses. There is an extension of unemployment benefits through September, which will be first week in September, which will be very important. There is help for housing, for both rental and mortgages, for food assistance, for transportation. I saw that Ted Kitchens is on. There's help in there for the airline industry and for airports. Some of that funding was passed back in December to help our airports, so that will be very important. And our bus systems, again, passed in December. There's also help for our schools and childcare, and all of you, I'm sure, understand very clearly that businesses are not going to be back to normal. Your employers are not going to be back to normal until kids can be back in school, until we're sure that childcare is going to be covered. So there's a lot of assistance to help our schools get back operating. And there are some significant tax credits, one for children that I'm really committed to because we know that investment in our kids early makes a huge difference later. And there's a child tax credit that is expected to bring almost half of children in this country out of poverty. So that will be significant. And finally, we're not going to get back to normal until we've defeated this pandemic. And there's about $160 billion in this package to help fight the coronavirus, to help with distribution of vaccines, to help with continued testing and tracing, to help with some of the research to find out what's happening with variants. And all of that is going to be so critical because we need to get people vaccinated. That's how ultimately we're going to get out of this pandemic. So again, thank you all so much for having me here this morning, and I look forward to the conversation and your questions.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen, and we do appreciate your time this morning. Next, we'd like to turn it over to Senator Maggie Hassan.
Well, thanks so much, Ashley and Mike. Thank you to everybody involved in the Commerce Corridor. I think it's just great that you all came together and collaborated in true Granite State style to help get through the pandemic. And I am sure, like so many others, as you're discovering the strength of doing that, it may be a relationship that bodes well for the future too. So congratulations on doing that. It is also great to be here with Amy Bassett. Amy, thank you for your work and the work of your entire team. It's been a very busy year for the SBA, to say the least, and we are very grateful for your service. I also wanted to add that on this Zoom with me is my Deputy State Director, Corey Gary, and he has put his information and how to contact our office in the chat room. Bobby Graham is also on. Bobby is our key state liaison for small businesses. And Laura Epstein from my office is also on. New Hampshire's innovative businesses and entrepreneurs are the engines of our economy. And I know you all recognize that. That's why you do what you do. And that's why this collaboration among these various chambers of commerce came about. You all create good jobs, you support a strong middle class, and you serve as the backbone for our communities. As you all know, this pandemic has put all of our businesses under an enormous amount of stress and placed significant obstacles in the way of new businesses working to start up and grow. Um, I've heard, as I know Senator Shaheen has, from businesses throughout our state who have worked hard to adapt and to keep their doors open. And I've been really grateful for Senator Shaheen's leadership on the PPP program, and it's great to be here with her this morning, as well as working with our colleagues in the Senate to ensure that businesses all across our state receive the support that they need. So Senator Shaheen really talked about the overall pieces of the American Rescue Plan. So I'm not going to go over all of that again, but I am going to talk a little bit about a couple of the aspects of it that I work particularly on, including a provision that really gives new businesses vital tools that they're going to need to pay their bills. And really make sure that all of our businesses have what they need so that as we get through the pandemic, you're really in a good position, not only to stay afloat, but then to really help our economy grow again and thrive. One of the things that I work to include in this last package is a provision for new businesses that started up during the pandemic. One of the things I've really been struck by, as I've talked to businesses all across the state, is the number of new businesses who had the courage and the guts to start up a business during a pandemic and keep it going against all odds. It's hard enough to start up a small business in the best of times. Doing it during a pandemic really takes creativity and grit. So this package includes my Bipartisan Recovery Startup Assistance Act, which is a long name to say that it provides payroll assistance to new small businesses that were started during the pandemic. And specifically, starting in July of 2021, so needs to get up and running, so it'll start in July. The bill provides new small businesses, and that's businesses that started after the middle of February of 2020, with a tailored version of the employee retention tax credit. And that will be available through the rest of 2021. That helps businesses hire and retain employees by providing advance payments covering payroll and healthcare expenses. The American Rescue Plan, as you also know, in addition to that employee retention tax credit, also includes $25 billion specifically for restaurants and hospitality industry businesses. And that's something I was very grateful to partner with Senator Shaheen on as we pushed Senate leadership to make sure it was included. As Jean mentioned, in addition to direct support for businesses, a critical part of the package is its investment in public health. It contains funding, the American Rescue Plan does, to get more vaccines into arms as quickly as possible. And can't say this strongly enough, how important it is to get people vaccinated for us to really defeat this pandemic and get back up and running. So the bill provides additional funding to strengthen vaccine administration and distribution, to scale up our testing and contact tracing efforts, and to procure personal protective equipment and other medical supplies that will still be necessary as we're fighting variants of the disease. All these steps go hand in hand with the direct support for businesses. Last thing I just want to say, as a member of the HELP committee, which stands for Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, is that should you be talking with friends and neighbors who are hesitant to get the vaccine for whatever reason, please feel free to reach out to our office to connect people to those with expertise about the vaccine. But I also just think it's really important, if people have questions about it, for folks to know that while the clinical trials of these vaccines and the production of them were done at record speed for a whole variety of reasons, the science was developed over a decade or longer. So this was not science in some laboratory created out of nowhere because there was pressure to get it done. The science has been around for a long time. And I think that that is important to let people know. And I'm happy to talk more about that if that's of interest. But what we're hearing from people who are hesitant is they're distrustful because it happened so fast. And in the past, vaccines have taken so much longer. And there are good reasons for that, but the science has been developed over years and years. And I want people to understand that because it may help us get more people vaccinated more quickly. We are beginning with this vaccine to see a light at the end of the tunnel in this pandemic. And the American Rescue Plan will provide small businesses with the support that they need to remain open. And then I hope as they reopen and the economy gets stronger and more consumers engaged, it's really going to power our economic recovery. You're certainly going to have questions, small businesses throughout the state in particular. One of the reasons I'm so glad for this opportunity today. So I encourage each local chamber to please stay in touch with my office as questions come up, and please encourage businesses to reach out with any questions you may have. Again, Corey Gary has put our office information in the chat room. I look forward to hearing from all of you today. Thanks for this opportunity.
Well, thank you, Senator Shaheen and Senator Hassan, for those remarks and kicking off the discussion. I want to remind everybody that please drop your questions into the chat, and we're going to try to filter through them and get to as many as we can. Ashley and I have some pre-submitted questions from members that we want to try and get through to get started, but really would encourage everybody to submit their questions as we go along so we can have a great discussion. I wanted to start with a question, actually, Senator Hassan, just picking right up on the vaccine discussion, because it's obviously an important one that's on everyone's mind, which is a good thing. And I appreciate those comments about folks really looking at the science in terms of instilling confidence. New Hampshire actually kicked off a new phase today of opening it up more, and grateful to say that I've had some family members who've been able to get signed up, which is fantastic. And I just wonder if you could both perhaps comment on the supply element has been key to seeing this continued ramp up. And do you have confidence that, what we've seen as projections coming from the administration in terms of increased supply, we're going to continue hitting those marks, and that it's just going to allow the state to continue to ramp up availability over the next month or so?
I'm happy to start with that one, and then Jean, if you want to add. Look, what we have seen so far is the administration invoking the Defense Production Act, for instance, and working with manufacturers to increase the production of the various vaccines, even including that partnership between, where Merck is helping its competitor develop and produce more and more of the vaccine. So I have confidence that the administration is following the numbers closely, has good reason to make the projections they do, and barring any kind of major weather interruption or some sort of glitch with manufacturing, it does appear that they should be able to stay on schedule with that, and that will ramp up that availability. I know I had family members trying to get on the website this morning too, and I know it was a very busy and sometimes not very operational website early, but it sounds like it's getting better today. But I think it really does show a sign of just how anxious people are to get these vaccines. And to date, we have every reason to believe that the production targets are going to be met.
Yes, I would just echo what Maggie said. And there was good news today because the AstraZeneca vaccine released a lot of their scientific data that shows that some of the concerns that had been raised in Europe about that vaccine are not actually the reason why we saw some of those health issues for people who took that vaccine. So I would expect that that is going to go forward. And so we will soon have 4 vaccines that will be available. Now we need to continue to ensure that the production goes forward. And we're really fortunate in New Hampshire because we have Lonza that's partnered with Moderna to produce the vaccines. And so far, that's going very well. And kudos to Lonza and Moderna and all their good work, as well as to everybody who's been working to produce these vaccines. I was at a vaccination site last Friday down in Exeter with the National Guard, watching how they're doing the vaccines. And as many of you know, many of those sites have been with people outdoors in their cars. They're looking for places to be inside, which will allow them to vaccinate many more people in the time allotted. But thank you to the National Guard for all of the great work that they've done, and to Perry Plummer, who's come in and taken over the logistics with the Guard of that operation. It's going well, as you point out, and as Senator Hassan said, there are a lot of people who still need to get vaccinated, so we've got to move with full speed ahead, but I'm confident that the vaccines will be there.
That's great, thank you. So Senator Shaheen, if I could pick up and ask you another question on a topic that you raised, the Payroll Protection Program. I actually recall, it's hard to think it's been a year, but it was around a year ago that we were having calls like this when that program was being formulated, and there's been so many evolutions and changes since, all for the better based on what we've heard from our members. I'm wondering if you could just drill down and touch a little bit more deeply in terms of recent changes to the program in this last round. And you mentioned that there's some work ahead in need of extending the deadline, and basically any high level notes people should know as they're looking forward. I mean, certainly as we continue to come across people who haven't taken advantage of the program yet, we're strongly encouraging them to do so. I think there is a upcoming deadline on the 31st that people should be aware of as well. And where do you see the program going from there?
Well, that 31st deadline is the one we're trying to get extended. And so that's one of the major changes that we need to get done. Hopefully, we will be able to get that through the Senate this week. It passed the House last week. And the program in its first couple of weeks this time was targeted towards the smallest businesses with fewer employees, and to minority-owned businesses. So what we learned from the program, and Amy is here and I'm sure can elaborate on what I have to say, but what we've learned is that if you didn't have a relationship with a lender throughout the initial months of the PPP program, some of the smallest businesses, some minority-owned businesses fell through the cracks. And so this iteration that's in the American Rescue Package is designed to try and address some of those concerns that we heard. But at this point, this program has helped over 34,000 businesses in New Hampshire to the tune of not quite $3.5 billion. So we know that it's worked for a lot of folks. It's not perfect. We got to continue to look at what needs to change in order to address the concerns that you all have as business people. But it has been really critical in helping so many of our businesses stay afloat. And as Senator Hassan mentioned, the package that is designed to help restaurants, which is a big piece of what's in the American Rescue Plan under the small business provisions, I think it's $28.6 billion to help restaurants, is really important. And we expect the guidance around that to be rolled out by about mid-April, I think. Is that right, Amy?
That's what they're currently advising us, yes.
Good. So hopefully they will get that done, because I know one of the challenges we've got is that with the programs that are being administered by SBA, the increased funding for emergency injury disaster loans for this restaurant program, we've got a limited number of people who have, like all of you on the call, been working really hard over the last year. And as hard as it is to be patient, we got to be patient and help them, support them as they try and get this guidance out so that people know what to do to apply for these programs.
Thank you, Senator. I'm going to turn it over to Ashley as she has a few questions pre-submitted as well, and then we'll start working through some of the questions in the chat.
Thank you, Mike. So for this one, I don't know if Senator Hassan, you'd like to take this one first. I know that you focused on including the employee retention tax credit in this piece of legislation. A lot of people have heard the term, but aren't sure what is it, does it affect them? So if you'd like to share some more about that.
Sure. Thanks so much, Ashley, for the question. So the employee retention tax credit, it was really, really designed to help businesses, again, keep people on payroll by providing a tax credit to them for a certain percentage of the cost of salary and healthcare benefits. My focus, and that was in the original CARES Act passed now about a year ago. What wasn't available to businesses until the December package was the ability to take both the employee retention tax credit and a PPP loan that could be forgiven too. And so in December, I worked with Senator Burr to make sure that the relief package then included a provision that allowed businesses who had already gotten a PPP loan to also take advantage of the employee retention tax credit. You can't double dip, you can't use them for the same expenses, but the understanding here is that you might take out the PPP loan, but still have uncovered payroll expenses, and you could use the employee retention tax credit for that. The next stage of this is what we did in the American Rescue Plan. The new businesses that started during the pandemic couldn't take advantage of either PPP or the employee retention tax credit. We wanted to make sure they could do that. So this is a tax credit starting in July that can be paid in advance for new businesses. And I'm just looking at my notes so I get this all correct. It's for businesses that have less than $1 million in gross receipts. It also has an overall credit cap. You can claim a maximum of $50,000 in assistance per calendar quarter. And that represents you can take up to 70% of payroll and healthcare benefits per employee. And the idea here is simply to make sure that we're giving new businesses the chance to make those new hires in this critical time period. And so you should reach out to our office if you want more information about it, but that's what the employee retention tax credit is. And we just wanted to make sure that not only could all businesses that had also taken the PPP get access to it, but that new businesses could get access as well.
Thank you. Senator Shaheen, did you want to add anything about that?
No, I think Senator Hassan has covered it very well.
Yes, it's amazing how much time each of you must have spent learning the ins and outs of each of the iterations of the legislation and really working it through the process. So I know there's quite a few business owners in New Hampshire that appreciate the access to the information, as well as knowing that it's an ever-changing process as we go month to month. So knowing that an answer from 2 months ago is not necessarily the same as an answer now.
Well, thanks, Ashley. And that's why we have Michelle and Robert from my office on, why Amy is on, and so that we've got the experts who can help get into the real specifics.
And that's where Bobby and Corey come in too. I would just add that a lot of what we are able to do in the Senate is because the New Hampshire business community is so good at sharing with us what their experiences are like and what their needs are and where the gaps and holes are in these various programs. So kudos to all of you, because you make it possible for us to advocate for you.
Thank you. So we do have one more pre-submitted question before we'll turn it over to Kate for some of our questions from the chat. Most people's information about the rescue plan has been news sound bites. So there's been some wording about the money coming into the municipal governments and how that could offset from tax or rent or things like that. So Senator Shaheen, if you wanted to go first, but just any thoughts that you'd like to share about the money that's coming to help support New Hampshire as part of this plan?
Yes, as many of you remember, back when we did the CARES Act, there was funding that went to the state. So New Hampshire got 1.25 billion that the governor was able to distribute, but local communities didn't get any direct funding through that plan. I'm happy to say that under the American Rescue Plan, there is about 130 billion that is going to local governments. So it's divided up 65 billion to counties and 65 billion to municipalities. So that means that all of that money is going to be distributed to communities throughout New Hampshire, mostly based on, not the whole 65 billion, but all of it goes to communities throughout the country, and communities in New Hampshire will get those dollars based mostly on per capita. So it will go mostly based on how many people live in a community, but there is some need factored into that formula as well. So counties will get funding in New Hampshire, as will communities. And that's going to be really important for those communities that have really been on the front lines of this pandemic, for those first responders, for municipal workers, for teachers. All of that funding will be very helpful. We are working on a breakdown of approximately how much each community will get. And so we're happy to share that when we have finished those numbers for anybody who would like to contact our office.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I would just add, if I could, that one of the things we're really looking at here is how to make sure that municipalities can not only continue to provide the frontline services that they have, fire, safety, police, teaching, but they also aren't pushed into raising property taxes in order to provide those services, right? So this is really a twofer. And the other thing that we all heard loudly and clearly is, while states have one kind of budget cycle, and some states are doing better than others and had unexpected better revenues at different points during the pandemic than others. Localities obviously have a different budget year sometimes, a different budget process, and they may rely on things like commercial property taxes a lot more. And if you have large commercial property owners who can't pay their full property tax because of a decline, for instance, in their revenues, it's really been putting some municipalities in a tough place. They've also been, obviously, the frontline workforce has been in a really tough place in terms of the number of cases of COVID that they've had to deal with, quarantining folks or having people out because they've got COVID while still providing these frontline services. So there's been overtime expenses. There have just been a lot of challenges that our localities have faced. And in the first round of the CARES Act, only large localities got any direct money. And obviously New Hampshire is a place where we don't have, by national standards, large localities. So it's been really important that we get this direct aid in. And you know, it also comes with school aid. And the one note I will make about the school funding that is there, it is obviously intended to help schools reopen safely. And the CDC has new guidelines out that says social distancing in schools can be 3 feet, not 6 feet, which is going to be important as they reopen safely. But it also provides dollars for summer programs, for after-school programs, and a set aside for kids with special needs, because we know they've been particularly hard hit by remote learning. So in addition to just helping reopen, it's got dollars to support the enrichment programs that are going to be so important to kids as they recover, but also intended to help our schools help kids with learning loss that they may have experienced during this year. So it's got a longer term plan here, because we think the impact on our kids of a year of remote learning has been significant and will take a while to address.
And if I could just add, one of the important things about those dollars that are going to the local level is that they're very flexible. So communities are going to be able to use those dollars for economic development initiatives to help particular industries in the community that may be hard hit. So in addition to some of the things that may be happening at the state level or nationally to help certain industries like the restaurant fund, those local communities can also use those dollars in a way that's very flexible. So as you're thinking about what kinds of innovation and initiatives you may want to try and do, check with your communities, because they may have some funding that's available for you.
Thank you, Senators. And so we have about 20 minutes left on the call. So we'd like to turn it over to Kate, who's going to filter some of the questions from the chat box for us. And Kate's from Greater Nashua.
Morning. Thank you for being
morning.
here, Senators. And good morning to everyone else. Nice to see everybody on this beautiful Monday morning. So we have a bunch of questions here. So what is the best resource we can pass along to folks to keep them up to speed on what's available for them? There's sort of a go-to.
Well, certainly contacting either of our offices is helpful, but I don't know, Amy and Michelle, I assume that for it depends a lot on which provisions you're interested in. So for small businesses, you would want to go to the website for the SBA. For some of the other programs, you'd be looking at different places. Michelle, did you want to add?
Yeah, I cannot stress enough how valuable the Small Business Development Center is as a resource as well. And they can really look at balancing federal programs, state programs, even a lot of local communities have gap funding grants and other types of very flexible lending products out there. So definitely work with the Small Business Development Center advisor and check back with them often to update your pandemic resiliency plan. But Senator Shaheen, as you mentioned, it's just, we have an amazing New Hampshire district office for the SBA. And obviously myself and Bobby Graham and Senator Hassan's office are always available as well. So.
And let me just say, Michelle won't say this, but I can. The SBDC's state allocation has been cut pretty dramatically as this budget process is going through the state. So if you've worked with the SBDCs, if you think they're doing a great job, which I would agree they are, let your legislator know, because the budget item is going to continue to be a concern as we think about how we keep our SBDCs operating.
All right, so we have another question. Someone asking about support for nonprofits. Could you talk a little bit about what that looks like?
Maggie, you want to go ahead?
Well, I'll just start, and then I'm sure Jean will have more to add, but the PPP program is available to nonprofits. One of the challenges that we heard about loudly and clearly was from not-for-profits who had multiple locations, so they were over the employee threshold and couldn't qualify in the first iteration of the PPP program. That has been addressed at some level through the American Rescue Plan. If you have multiple sites, like a Boys and Girls Club, you can have up to, I believe it's 500 employees now as a not-for-profit and still access the PPP program. And then obviously there may be some other specialty programs if you're a not-for-profit arts organization, for instance, with some of the Save Our Stages funding, for instance, may also be available. But I also want to just turn it over to Senator Shaheen and just see, as one of the architects of the PPP program, if she has more to add.
Well, just something that I'm sure all of the chambers know, and that is that when we passed the package back in December, we added 503c6s, which covers all of our chambers and association organizations, to what was available. So all of you now hopefully can access those dollars in a way that can help the businesses that you're trying to serve. So as we know, our nonprofits provide significant services in our communities, and we need to ensure that they continue to get through this pandemic just like our small businesses. So as Senator Hassan said, the program was designed to help not just small business, but nonprofits, and some changes in the American Rescue Plan makes more of those nonprofits available to be able to get the funding.
And on behalf of all of the 501c6s, we are grateful for that. So thank you. So changing directions a little bit. So a question from a company who relies on transportation as part of their business and says the cost of fuel is skyrocketing and it is killing us on top of everything else going on. What is the Biden administration or your offices doing to make fuel more affordable?
Well, we're looking at a whole range of opportunities for energy use that diversifies and helps to make fuel more available in other ways. You know, I think one of the reasons we're seeing the impact on gasoline fuel is because of some of the storms that we've seen this winter, which has had a real impact. And unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do about that except diversifying in a way that not only provides alternatives for energy use that uses fossil fuels frees up fossil fuels so that they can be used for gasoline, but also long-term looks at what other options we have as we're looking at our transportation sector.
And I would just add that it also speaks to the need as we look at infrastructure investments generally to making sure that all of our sources of energy production and distribution have a level of weatherproofing that they haven't had in every part of the country. You know, one of the unique experiences of being New England senators and former governors is the number of colleagues from other parts of the country that are not used to some of this extreme weather, the discussions we've been having about what they haven't considered before in terms of weatherproofing. So as we see increased extreme weather, one of the things we need to do is be resilient, and we need to invest in resilience measures while we also do what Jean was talking about, which is diversifying our energy sources and making sure that we're not overly reliant on any one source.
Right, thank you. And then, so curious about, someone asked about the self grants, so the Self-Employed Livelihood Fund, whether or not those will be made available again, whether or not self-employed folks have been part of the conversation.
That's a state program, and so I think you should check with your state officials and see what they have to say, and let them know this is something that, if it's been helpful, that you would like to see re-upped.
Yeah, and I will also just add that as I'm looking at my notes, I do think that the administration, and Amy, you may want to speak to this, has instituted a new rule to provide more generous loan terms for sole proprietors and self-employed individuals. There are some issues about the timing of those new rules and when they apply, but there may be additional support or new support for some sole proprietors and self-employed folks out there because of these new rules.
Yeah, if I could just add on to that, thank you for that, Senator Hassan. Within the last several weeks, the SBA, the guidelines have changed on how you calculate the maximum loan amount for a self-employed, what we call a Schedule C filer. So now what the income that can be used to determine the maximum loan amount is the gross income versus where it was gross profit versus net profit. So that is clearly going to benefit sole proprietors with or without employees and enable them to get a larger loan amount. And and there are most instances where if you just recently received a PPP loan and weren't able to take advantage of these changes, oftentimes you can work with your lender to get that adjustment made so that you could get the larger loan amount. And again, ultimately, hopefully the PPP, yes, it's a loan, but ultimately it's forgivable. So again, acting like a grant as well.
Great, thank you. All right, Mike, I'm going to pass it back over to you.
All right, thanks, Kate, and thanks everyone for your participation. And if we aren't able to get to all the questions, you know, I think as the senators have mentioned, resources are available afterwards. So feel free to reach out to us here at the chambers or the senator's staff, and more than happy to connect everyone to the right information. We're starting to run up against our time, so wanted to wrap up shortly, senators, with a kind of a question looking forward. I think both of you mentioned in your remarks that, you know, we need to be thinking of how do we fuel the economic recovery coming out of the pandemic, and that was so much of what the American Rescue Plan was targeted at. But looking ahead beyond that, when it comes to other legislative priorities, you know, what are the legislative priority or the legislative priorities that you are most interested in advancing next, with that mindset of this is something that's going to really help and build upon economic recovery coming out of the pandemic? Senator Shaheen, do you want to lead off?
Sure. I think the most likely next major package of legislation is going to address infrastructure. And that is an opportunity for us to look at a whole range of investments that we need to be making in America and our American people in order to be able to stay competitive in the future. As we know, we are now competing with China, both on a national security front as well as an economic front. And so ensuring that we continue to invest in America is really important, and not just our roads and bridges, our water systems and sewer systems, but also in high-speed internet. One of the real disparities that has been laid bare during this pandemic is the differences in who has access to high-speed internet and the differences that makes in terms of the opportunities that are available. It's true of businesses, as all of you know, and this call is a perfect example of the challenges when everybody doesn't have access to high-speed internet. So we need to make those investments. Those are going to be critical. And we need to look at ways we can continue to support job creation as the result of infrastructure. One of the things I'm focused on as we're looking at an infrastructure package, just trying to ensure that we include in that more efficiency, and so that we can be as energy efficient as possible in what we're doing. It's as we think about how do we respond to climate change and the challenges of climate change, ensuring that we can look at the impact of the investments that we're making and ensure that they're as energy efficient as possible is going to be really important. So those are some of the things that I've been working on and thinking about as we look at what we need to do to continue to grow this economy and provide opportunities for all Americans.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hassan.
Thanks for the question, Mike. And I think what I would add, as we're looking at infrastructure generally, it's likely to be a big package, but it's also likely to address some of the things we need to support in order to make the infrastructure work actually happen. So from a workforce training point of view, there's a lot of bipartisan work going on right now, not only to make sure that businesses have the workers they need with the relevant training and skills, but making it more affordable for our young people to matriculate into an apprenticeship or a job training program where they can get a good economic start and continue to learn and earn new credentials while they're working. So that's one area of focus that I've got bipartisan bills filed on that we'll continue to work on. Lowering healthcare costs, obviously critically important for our economy moving forward. I was glad to work with my Republican colleague, Bill Cassidy, to end the practice of surprise medical billing, which should have an impact on lowering overall health care costs, and that will go into effect next January. We need to do more, obviously, to lower prescription drug costs too, to get healthcare costs down. And then a couple of other items that I think we need to work on really, partly as a concept of infrastructure, but also just tools for our businesses and for our overall security and operability. Cybersecurity continues to be a major priority of mine, not just for federal agencies, not just in terms of partnering with state and local governments, which we have implemented some programs to do, but all subcontractors, all of our supply chain really needs to have a level of cybersecurity that makes sure that the overall economic links we have are secure as we work to rebuild our economy and as we protect ourselves from aggressors and adversaries like China. And last thought is we know how important research and development is to existing businesses as well as new businesses. So I continue to focus on the Finance Committee on changes to the R&D tax credit so that it would be more available for startups. It's going to be critically important to support startups and entrepreneurs as we recover here. And that's something that I'm focused on doing from my Finance Committee seat. So those are just some of the things I'm really lucky to be working with all of you and with Senator Shaheen as we work to not only get through this pandemic, but to rebuild and really watch our economy take off on the other side of it.
Great. Well, thank you both for those answers. I think that's really helpful. I think on behalf of the chamber leaders on this call, you will find us eagerly supportive of infrastructure as a top priority, given all of our involvement in infrastructure and economic development. And I wanted to note in particular the comment from our airport director, Ted Kitchens, who was offering his support and thanks for the federal support to the aviation industry during this pandemic. And our Commerce Corridor is actually working closely with the airport for this very reason, that we know that infrastructure is a major economic driver, and what we can do to help Ted and his team grow air service coming out of the pandemic is going to really support economic recovery and create more jobs. So thank you for your support and help on that. We are running up against time, so I think we're going to have to close. So a few just housekeeping items that if you have any follow-up questions, of course, reaching out to chamber staff as well as staff for Senator Hassan and Senator Shaheen, who have been dropping their contact information into the chat, and also accessible through, I think, the links that you use to sign up. And want to thank everybody on behalf of the Commerce Corridor Chambers of Commerce for joining us today. We are gonna, this video is recorded. It'll be posted on our Coalition YouTube page, also accessible through our NewHampshireCommerceCorridor.com website, but really appreciate everyone's engagement and support with each of our chamber organizations. And on behalf of the chambers, thank you, Senator Hassan, Senator Shaheen, for your time and support this morning. We appreciate the partnership.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. And please reach out if we can be helpful.
Same here. Thanks, everybody. And our Manchester office is 603-622-2204. So feel free to reach out, please. And everybody, it's been great to see so many familiar faces on this Zoom. Everybody be safe and be well.
And get vaccinated.
Yeah, get vaccinated.
Thank you.
And hi, Bob Elliott.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. We'll talk to you all soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.